I do want to make a brief contribution to this legislation, and it's important legislation, and I do agree with my colleague Tara Moriarty and some of the previous speakers that it is inadequate, but we in the Labor Party in opposition have a responsibility to make sure that perfection doesn't become the enemy of good. And the truth is that this bill, with the amendments that we're going to propose, will be an improvement. It's not great, it's not the ideal outcome that we would have hoped for, but we intend to move those amendments and try and knock it into some sort of shape. And I want to make special thanks to my colleague, the Shadow Minister for Emergency Services, Trish Doyle, for attempting to get amendments which will make a tangible improvement to the bill. Mr President, the Bushfire Legislation Amendment Bill 2020, unfortunately, as I've said, in its current form as introduced by the government, does not do enough to respond to the devastating bushfire season that our state endured last summer. Amendments are needed to ensure that we are addressing bushfire risks and making certain that the legislation is comprehensive in an effort to protect our communities and assist them in their recovery. I must acknowledge that the bushfire season commenced on 1 October and this legislation is far too delayed, and the Berejiklian government should have responded with legislation at a much earlier date to protect and support our communities. Unfortunately, the legislation is problematic, and this is not unanticipated due to the lack of consultation by the Minister. Not only did the Minister not consult with the opposition, with only briefing Labor's Shadow Minister for Emergency Services, Trish Doyle, following the second reading speech, but the Minister also did not bother to take the time to consult and ask for feedback on the legislation from the Fire Brigade Employees Union and the Public Sector Association. And those opposite, Mr President, often criticise us for our closeness with the unions. But understand this, those unions have people on the front line working with these tragedies on a day-to-day basis. They live and breathe this stuff literally, and they know the problems on the ground. And if you're a Minister of the Crown, whether you're Labor or Liberal, it's incumbent on you to consult those subject matter expertise. You'll get a better outcome every time.
And he chucked a wobbly in the crossbench.
These unions represent the many essential individuals who do the brave and essential work of protecting our communities. Our firefighters were deeply impacted and distressed by the horrific and devastating bushfires last summer, and to simply disregard their voices and not even attempt to discuss the legislation is shocking. The Honourable David Elliott did not consult either the Fire Services Joint Standing Committee, which reports directly to the Minister. The representatives on this committee include the following, Mr President: the Commissioner of the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, the Commissioner of the New South Wales Fire Brigades, a staff member from the New South Wales Fire Brigades nominated by the Commissioner of Fire and Rescue New South Wales, a staff member of the New South Wales Rural Fire Service nominated by the Commissioner of the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, and individuals who are appointed at the recommendation of the Fire Brigade Employees Union and the New South Wales Rural Fire Service Association by the Minister. It's highly disappointing and troubling that the legislation has been formed by the government without taking on board the expert opinion of the committee, as it plays an essential role in coordinating the best strategies to try to keep people safe in our state. It is in the best interest for the communities across New South Wales for everyone to come together to ensure we have the best outcomes being delivered for the safety of our residents, and the ability to rebuild communities depends upon it. The government stated that it would accept all 76 recommendations from the 2019-2020 bushfire season inquiry report. However, residents across our state are still waiting to see a timeline and to actually know when these will be implemented effectively. The public deserves to have comprehensive details regarding funding and investments for every recommendation. It is essential that the government is accountable and that there is a sufficient method to trace how these recommendations are being put into effect. Mr President, Labor believes that the government should be obliged to table a report on a quarterly basis which details the status of the inquiry recommendations. Therefore, Labor's amendments reflect this, where the Minister would be compelled to lay reports before Parliament that detail the government's progress in implementing all 76 recommendations of the final report of the New South Wales Bushfire Inquiry. And Mr President, I do want to make special note of two people who came to see the Shadow Minister and I, Brett Carl and Ryan Cleggett from the Cancer Coalition. The acronym is the Coalition Aiming for National Carcinogen Exposure Reduction. Those two people came to us by virtue of a referral we had from a Labor Party branch member who was appalled by the exposure to danger that these firefighters, these volunteer firefighters, had, in the sense that they weren't given adequate PPE, shonky P2 or less grade masks, and we would hope that part of that, we're talking about $192 million over 5 years. It's not a paltry amount, but it's not great either. And we would hope that part of that $192 million is dedicated towards providing those volunteers. You would imagine that if you're going to volunteer to put your life on the line, that you get decent PPE, least of which would be much, much better than the P2 masks which these people are running around in. They should be provided with at least the same standard, Mr President, as professional firefighters, and we hope that the Minister directs his attention to allocating part of that funding to that project. The Minister would also be compelled, under the amendments that we're moving, to review the amendments made to the legislation to determine whether the policy objectives of the amendments remain valid and whether the terms of the amendments remain appropriate for securing those objectives. In addition, a report must be issued before Parliament or presented to the Clerk of the House if Parliament is not sitting regarding this. It is extremely important that there is a high level of transparency when we're dealing with such critical safety issues. Stakeholders, including many firefighters, environmental groups and scientists, are extremely concerned that the bill currently allows for broad-scale land clearing. Now, Labor had moved amendments in the lower house, Mr President, which would have had the effect that, and I note that the Honourable Mark Latham said they would have doubled it. Well, our amendments would have had the effect of limiting it to a cumulative maximum width of 25 metres instead of the 25 metres clearing of either side of the boundary, which is going to result in 50 metres total under the current bill. Unfortunately, the government did not accept those amendments in the lower house, and accordingly we won't pursue them here, given that we've got general agreement on our other amendments. As I said, Mr President, let's not make the perfect the enemy of the better. The amendments will also ensure that vegetation clearing work cannot be carried out unless a rural boundary clearing code is in force prior to land clearing. Labor thinks it is essential...
Order.
Order.
The Honourable Mark Latham should cease interjecting. Mr Buttigieg has the call.
Thank you, Mr Latham. Labor thinks it is essential that we are listening to key experts and therefore believes that the membership of the Bushfire Coordinating Committee should be expanded to also include a member of the FBEU, that's the Fire Brigade Employees Union, the Public Sector Association and the Rural Fire Service Association, a person nominated by NTS Corp and a person to promote the integrity of cultural burning practices, and this has been addressed or will be addressed within our amendments. Bushfires, Mr President, devastated our state, and so many of our residents and their communities have been enduring shocking loss and hardship. The incredibly brave men and women in New South Wales who work tirelessly fighting these fierce fires and protecting our communities also endured tremendous adversity. This legislation needs to be far more comprehensive to respond to last year's devastating summer bushfires. It is abundantly clear that the Labor amendments are required as the current legislation lacks adequate transparency and responsibility.